Welcome to the HP World Tour in Sydney, Australia. I'm joined by Andrew Bolwell, Chief Disruptor for Personal and Printing Systems. Now, Andrew, we're here talking about the new style of IT today, and one really big trend that's just emerging is the Internet of Things. Can you help our audience to understand a little bit about what that actually means?
Yeah, sure. So part of my role is to look out into the markets and try and discern the key trends that are emerging, and then to work across HP to help figure out what we need to be doing about them. And one of the big trends that, and obviously you just mentioned it, is the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is something that isn't necessarily new. I think it's getting a lot of attention these days with discussion around the smart home or the connected home, a lot of consumer focus. But when you really dig under the covers, I think there's a huge opportunity in the commercial space for the Internet of Things. You've got airlines like Boeing who are outfitting their latest planes with sensors and equipment that can transmit data in real time during a flight. If there's a problem during the flight with anything on the plane, it can alert people on the ground of what the problem is. They can have the parts ordered before the plane hits the ground. Maintenance can be there already. So, you know, the benefit of that is that instead of a plane having to wait around for a couple of hours on the ground while people fix the problem, the Internet of Things, if you will, has already notified people of what the problem is, and they're ready for it and can fix it before the plane hits the ground. So there's a lot of use cases like that in the commercial space.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the concept sort of brings in aspects of mobility and devices. How do we do that securely? How do we use big data and analytics to make use of that information? So what other kind of interesting use cases have you seen globally that might be setting some of the direction for Australian organizations?
You know, I think the Internet of Things is a market of markets. It's a technology trend. In my opinion, it's going to impact every industry at different rates and scales, be that banking, be it government, be it manufacturing. And the use cases are similarly very varied. So some people are using it to provide better support to their customers. So the Internet of Things is all about devices that generate data and transmit that data over networks, and then on the back end is this big data platforms and analytics which analyze that data, figure out what's going on, and then take action. So any use case that involves an end device and some sort of back-end intelligence is really ripe for the Internet of Things to really improve the way we do things today.
Okay, and is that similar to this concept of contextual computing? Is that sort of another way to look at big data?
Yeah, I think you know, when you look at the new technology that we're seeing emerge, you know, we talk about wearables. So wearables are, if you will, a consumer endpoint of the Internet of Things. But we talk about everything around us being online and connected. I talk about that being from a toothbrush through to a city, right, being censored up and more intelligent. All of these new technology form factors, they need different sort of software to drive them. They need what we call contextual computing or contextual software that knows about the user, knows more about the context of a situation, and uses that to provide personalized attention and services.
Okay, so there's sort of this blend between really detailed consumer or personal information and then how we make use of that on a broader organizational context. So if we talk about things like wearables or devices that track your sleep patterns, I mean, how are things like that useful to larger organizations?
Well, I think the concepts are useful to larger organizations. So it may not be a bed that has sensors like it is in the consumer space, but a jet engine or mechanic or health equipment, right? All of these are endpoints for the Internet of Things, and all of them have huge impact on the companies that manufacture them and the companies that use them. Think about you ship a product from somewhere to somewhere else, being able to track that product as it moves from your warehouse to shipping to your distribution points. Having all of that information come back in real time about where that product is and the status of that product, that revolutionizes like supply chain, for example. So that's another example of how the Internet of Things is really going to impact the commercial space as much or even more than the consumer space, in my opinion.
And we heard things in the keynote this morning as well about entire cities collecting data about, everyone's Fitbit noticed that people woke up at 3 a.m. in the morning it turned out that it was an earthquake. And there's huge context for things like, public sector use as well.
I think that the key point with the Internet of Things is that it's transforming devices into services. And the value in those services is the data that's generated by the devices. In this case, it was the data that everybody's jawbone transmitted up, right? And they could analyze and look at and actually discern there was an earthquake at 3 a.m. in the morning. That data is the goal of the future. And this is why analytics and big data is sort of the backbone of the Internet of Things. This is why Haven as a platform within HP is so important and critical in this space. And that's why HP, quite frankly, is investing so much effort and time and resources into both the big data but also the cloud. Because all of this data that's generated has to be transmitted back somewhere for that analysis, and that's the cloud.
And of course the security implications of all this are huge, but in an organizational context, having the confidence that you've got the tools to cope with that data in a secure and responsible way is enormous.
And I think that's a critical point. I joked in my presentation earlier that there were viruses going into TVs and fridges, right? But think about now that, as you track your products across your supply chain that are all sending data back, that's proprietary data. That's data that's important to keep secure. And so security absolutely becomes critical. End-to-end security from the device back into the data center and into the cloud. And I do think that's somewhere, and obviously why HP also has a huge focus on that area too.
All right. Well, really exciting trend to keep on top of. Andrew, last question, and maybe some guidance and top tips for our audience.
Yep.
What are some of the key things to consider or to keep an eye on as this trend continues to emerge and develop?
I just think we're going to see, first of all, I think it's going to have a huge impact on all of us, from our lives as consumers to how we run our businesses. And I think you're going to see the Internet of Things transform business into services. We've talked about everything as a service for a while. I think the Internet of Things is going to drive that even faster, that emergence of everything as a service even faster, because everything will need to be a service.
Oh, fantastic. Exciting stuff. Thank you, Andrew. And we're signing out from the show floor at HP World Tour, Sydney, Australia, 2014.